If you were wondering why Deshaun Watson might be frustrated enough to force his way out of Houston, pull up a chair. We have a lot to unpack. Let's start with just how good he was this year. In the whole history of the sport, there are 4 quarterbacks who completed 70% of their passes at 8.5 yards per attempt over a full season. They are Joe Montana, Steve Young, and Drew Brees, who each did it once, and in all 3 of those seasons, their teams won the Super Bowl. Watson just became the 4th. His team went 4-12. How did that happen? Well, first of all, they couldn't run the ball at all. Their running backs had the fewest rushing yards in the entire league. And then their defense was unimaginably terrible. Over the 15 seasons that ESPN has been tracking defensive efficiency, this year's Texans were the 478th best defense out of 480. That is why franchise legend J.J. Watt apologized to his quarterback after the last game of the season. Remember, too, that this is a franchise that traded away DeAndre Hopkins, who was first-team All-Pro 3 straight seasons with Watson. He promptly went to Arizona and caught 115 balls this year. Now, the Texans have very little opportunity to add talent. They don't draft until the 3rd round this spring because they traded 2 1s and a 2 to Miami for Laramie Tunsil. And the franchise's other legend, Andre Johnson, is tweeting warnings at Deshaun. By the way, that was the first tweet Andre has had in 2 years that wasn't an ad for something. So, what happens now? Frankly, whatever Deshaun wants, because his team may not have listened when he suggested coaching candidates, but if he really does demand a trade, that will be something they cannot ignore. So those are my thoughts on this. Let me turn to the crew here and see what we think. Shefty, I'll start with you. What do you make of the whole situation right now, Deshaun Watson? Where are we?
You didn't even touch on the other option, Greeny, and that's Deshaun Watson withholding his services and refusing to report, which he also could do. And so there are a number of ways here that Deshaun Watson can and potentially will exercise his leverage on the Houston Texans. Now, let's also say this. They just hired our new general manager, Nick Caserio, last week. I think Nick Caserio had no idea that he was going to be stepping into the situation that has evolved in Houston over the last week. They don't yet have a head coach. Let's see who the Texans hire as a head coach. Let's see how Deshaun Watson feels about that. Let's have him sit down, if he's willing, with the new general manager and the head coach, whoever it is, to hear their vision and then make a decision. But if they go in a direction that he doesn't approve of for the head coach, this is a story that threatens to hang over this franchise all offseason and into next season.
You know, Dominique, when I was putting together that essay with Hembo, the one thing that really jumped out to me, we talked yesterday about how sort of not outspoken Andre Johnson has been. The fact that he hasn't tweeted anything in 2 years that wasn't an advertisement for something and chose to post this just goes to show you how meaningful that is to him, and I think speaks to a feeling about the organization that he obviously has and maybe Deshaun is starting to have.
Andre Johnson's a smart man, and I think maybe that's evidenced by the fact that he does not tweet other than to make money. But aside from that, he doesn't weigh in this way unless he wants us all to know this. Like, he can get a hold of Deshaun Watson, I'm sure, if he wants to. He's a Houston legend, and Deshaun Watson is on his way to being the same thing. That was the point of doing that. That, to me, suggests that he wants us all to know before, which I think is the reflex of many in the media and many fans. The reflex is to side with the organization and call the players spoiled or whatever. I think that is what Andre Johnson was doing there, because he could have called Deshaun Watson to tell him that. He's making sure that we act right and we understand that this is more complicated than we think going on in there without telling specific stories. And the last thing about Andre Johnson, he knows this very well personally because he was among the best receivers in the league throughout his career. But if you ask people who are new NFL fans, they don't hear his name. They don't hear his name not because he wasn't good enough or because he didn't perform or because he was unhealthy or something like that. They don't hear his name because the teams around him failed him. And he doesn't want that same thing to happen to Deshaun Watson years after his career is over.
Lewis, what do you think of the whole situation?
Yeah, look, I think, you know how much I talk about communication, and that's really what seems to have really failed and faltered at this point in time between Deshaun Watson and that's something that obviously, look, Deshaun is very aware of how short-lived careers can be, how much windows play a big part on whether or not you have the kind of career that you want and taking advantage of those windows. And right now he feels as though his window is not being maximized. And he wants to have someone in this organization that he really trusts and believes in, that's going to have a positive impact on his playing career and the rest of the football team. And, I mean, look, players more and more, considering how contracts are trending and how much guaranteed money is trending, especially in the favor of quarterbacks, give players a certain amount of voice that maybe they didn't have previously. And Deshaun is exercising his, so it would behoove management down there to listen to what this young man is saying at the risk of losing him either mentally or physically in and of itself when he decides not to show up.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.